and welcome back to the Girly Girl Bookworm. So today for you, I have an audiobooks that I've loved, part 2. So I did this video last February, and I have definitely gotten so much more into audiobooks since then. So I thought it would be nice to do an updated list. So this is not including every audiobook I've ever listened to. This is just the ones that have stood out as favorites that I love. 2 of them I don't own, so I might just do those right off the bat to get them out of the way. The first one was Falling. This one is a very good audiobook to listen to. I bet you would be good to read physically as well. I think that about all of them, obviously, but this one was about a man, and he is about to fly a plane. He wasn't supposed to fly this flight, but he ends up flying this flight, and he ends up getting basically hijacked, and he basically is told, you either crash this plane or I kill your family. And it just sets off on crazy events of trying to figure out who does he save, because he was basically told, like, if you tell anybody, I kill your family anyways, so make your decision. And so it's very suspenseful. I would not recommend reading this before you get on a flight or while you're on a flight, because that's just traumatic that you don't, just trauma you don't need. But that was a fantastic audiobook. And Three Mothers, which is a nonfiction novel, and this is about Nonfiction is not a novel, because novel means made up. This is a nonfiction book following the three mothers. So it follows the story of Martin Luther King Jr.'s mother, Malcolm X's mother, and James Baldwin. The writer, not the actor. So it follows their moms, and it follows the history about what was happening as they were kind of coming of age and raising children, and how that could have impacted how they raised their amazing children. And it was just a really interesting story, because it really, like I said in another video, like, I love when history can really be brought to life, and like just what it was like for women to be coming as being mothers in that type of period of time, even like compared to what motherhood is like now. And I just like, it's so interesting. Like, these women are just so strong. They're popping out all these children. I'm like, 2 was enough for me. Thank you. And to think that they had so many children and still had such an impact on life and their children and their children's impacts, and just it very interesting. So definitely highly recommend you check that one out. The rest I own. So one of them, I forgot to even put this one on the list, so I got to write it down. Everything Beautiful in Its Time. This is by Jenna Bush Hager. So this is another nonfiction memoir. The reason why I put this one on the list of audiobooks I love is Jenna reads this herself. Basically, anytime an author can read their own book, I am like all for it. You're going to see the next book is also the same way. Same reasoning. The Truth Behold, An American Journey by Kamala Harris. Again, it's read by her. So, of course, it's fantastic, because they set the tone of their own stories so well and so beautifully, obviously. In this one, we are really following Jenna and her grandparents, both sets of grandparents. So not just the Bushes, but the Haggers as well. That's not true. But also her mother's parents as well. And then this one is following Kamala as she is starting to kind of run for offices. Not necessarily vice president. She wasn't running for vice president when this came out. This came out in 2019, so that hadn't even been a thing yet. And it was just both very impactful, very interesting books. And that's that. Nonfiction, I find it so hard to actually like promote and talk about, but those are definitely really good audiobooks to listen to. Now, fiction-wise, we've got One Night Gone by Tara Laskowski. We are following a woman who goes to kind of house sit for this house. Years prior, there was a woman who had kind of gone missing. And so we're following both timelines. Very fantastic to listen to. Obviously, all of them. Little Secrets, we are following a woman who, when she was at the mall, she loses her son, and they cannot find him. And it's obviously putting a lot of strain on the marriage. And it's now like a year later. And she doesn't really speak to her husband, and she kind of hires this private investigator because basically the case has kind of run its course and it's kind of cold and they really can't find him. So she hires a private investigator who finds more than she bargained for. This one I really, really enjoyed. This is called Beasts of Extraordinary Circumstance by Ruth Emmy Lang. Now, this one I put on this list because it is a cast narration where we are following this boy, and he is orphaned and basically raised by wolves, and we are following his life, but not even necessarily through him. I think we only get his perspective twice throughout this entire story. But we are following other people who have come and gone into his life, and their kind of opinion, their outside opinion on him, and their outside story about him. Kind of some magical realism elements going on, because at one point there is a tornado, I think, and he is kind of caught like stopping it. So like they're trying to figure out like, is there something magical about him or not? Really interesting story. One that I did not think I was going to like. This was a 2017 pick, and I didn't pick it till this year because somebody told me to read it. So it was definitely a book that was never on my radar, never something I thought I'd like, and I actually really, really enjoyed it. We've got The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. This narrator is everything. If I read this physically, I don't know if I would have as much love for it as I did by listening to it, which I think is crazy because, like I said, when I said in the beginning, like any of these books I'm sure are fantastic reading physically, but this one was just the complete experience of the voice acting and all of the different characters. I feel like I don't even need to talk about this one's about, but this one is fantasy where we're following this guy, and he visits these orphanages and decides if they are good enough to open or if they should close, and he ends up being put on this case to go to this place, and there's basically the spawn of Satan, there's a gnome, there's just everything going on. These are the most dangerous kids, and it just teaches such great messages through this, and I just love this one. Like I said, I think this is one that I think would just definitely make me want to listen to again. It made me laugh, it made me cry, it just fantastic audio. Another one where I feel like everybody hates this book. They hate on, which is weird because it was in the top 5 for book of the month, but I swear everybody I see hates this book. But I loved this book. And that was The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. I listened to this one, couldn't get enough of it. This is following a dual timeline perspective of a woman who comes to London, and she is mudlarking or something, and where you like go through mud, and she finds this apothecary bottle and she wants to know more about it. And we're following the past of that apothecary, and that apothecary used to do some things and make some stuff that women would be able to give to these ill men in their life to take care of them, if you catch my drift. And it was just, I love this book. I don't know why, but I just do, and the audiobook was fantastic for it. The Float Plan by Trish Dollar. Like, I didn't own this book before I listened to it, and then after I listened to it, I loved it so much that I had to own it after. So I think that speaks a lot about it. This is about a woman, her fiance dies, and they were always supposed to take this sailboat on a trip, and they never got to. So she decides she's going to do it anyway. So she takes it out herself, which she then realizes she can't really do. So she ends up hiring this guy to do it with her, and it's their little romance. But it talks so much about finding yourself again, and grief, and love, and what it means to love somebody else, and just another fantastic, beautiful little book, and you need to read this one. I think I talk about this book incessantly, so I'm sorry if you've heard about it for the millionth time. Princess in Theory by Alyssa Cole. This is just fantastic. I listened to this one, and in that same month, I listened to the entire series because I just could not get enough. We are following a woman who is in America. She's going to college. She is in the STEM field, and she keeps getting all these emails saying that she is a princess and that she needs to marry this prince. And she's like, no, spam, you're not getting my money. I'm not listening to you. But really, she's supposed to marry this prince. And this prince decides, fine, I'm going to go get her myself. So he goes, and they kind of meet him. She meets him under, like, a false pretense where she thinks he's just a regular commoner man. And obviously he's not. And then romance ensues and lots of things ensue. And just, I love this series so much. Then we've got The Firekeepers Daughter by Angeline Booley. I just remember listening to this, and there's an event that happens, and I remember just, like, it just catching my breath, and just, like, because I feel like sometimes when you're reading, and you can almost, like, read a little too ahead by accident, so, like, this was, like, there was an event that just, like, happened where I didn't see it coming, and I just remember my jaw just being on the floor, and just, like, everything stopping, and I was just so captivated by this book, and just, it's technically YA, but it's following, like, an 18-year-old, so it's definitely an older part of YA. And she is Ojibwe, but she's not necessarily part of the community because her father never signed them. She only has, like, half a birth certificate signed, so I don't think her father signed it. So she can't prove that she is, like, enough Ojibwe to, like, be a full-fledged member. But she is very involved in the community. She plays hockey. Her brother plays hockey, and so she's very... There's a lot of things going on. I think, to me, the synopsis gives way too much away that, like, doesn't happen until a good chunk of the book. So I don't really like to give the synopsis for this book, but I will say that there's a little bit of a mystery element that is also going on in this story. I don't like to say what, because I just feel like, again, spoilers. But just take my word for it and read it, because this was another one that, like, was not necessarily fully on my radar. I think I read it because Kendra wanted to, and I was like, I guess I'll read it too. That's cool. And because it was a book of the month choice, I grabbed it. But, like, it was definitely not something that was necessarily, like, on my mind to read. And I'm so glad that I picked it up anyways, because it ended up being one of my favorite books that I read last year. And the last one is a book that I've read recently, and that is Dominicana by Angie Cruz. Part of why I was avoiding reading this book physically is because I heard that there was no quotation marks. But when you're listening to an audiobook, that doesn't matter. So I think that helped me so much more. This is following a young girl. She's about 15 years old, and she gets promised to this guy to go marry him so that way they can leave the Dominican and they can go to New York and be successful and hopefully bring her family there eventually. And it's just the trials and tribulations of what it's like to be young, an immigrant, in a new place. This is also historical fiction, so there's a lot of stuff that's going on historically for her as well. She's going through a lot of change really, really fast. I don't really want to spoil it because it is such a, like, character-driven story that I don't want to give that away. But really, really good. The end also had a author interview, and I found that to be really interesting. So definitely, if you're going to listen to it all the way through, so that way you can get the author interview, because it was really good to listen to, and it just brings the story kind of full circle for you. So yeah, that was my last one. So those are all audiobooks in the past a little bit over a year that I really enjoyed. There's others that I like too, but these were the ones that really stood out as favorites. I hope you guys liked this video. Let me know if you have any audiobook recommendations down below, and I will see you guys really soon. Bye, everybody.